The only way that's possible is you have to be awake, right? Yeah, the only way you can be present to what's happening now so that you're aware of thinking, because thinking is based on the past. So if you want to be able to create something different than what happened in the past, you have to be aware of thinking, but not have that be the reference for what you're looking at. You have to be aware of thinking, but not have that be the reference for what you're looking at. And the way you do that is by being awake and aware, being the awareness that is not identified with thinking, being the awareness that is not identified with the situation, not identified with the past, not identified with the physical body, not identified with emotions. That's called freedom. Freedom, right? The awareness is free. The truth will set you free. Freedom, like that? Yeah, the awareness is free, right? But in order for there to be awareness, you have to come out of the hypnotic condition. You have to come out of the default state. You have to come out of the operating system that has you as a physical body and a personality. And coming out of that system that has you as a physical body and a personality is what these practices are about. Because when you're practicing, what are you doing? Relaxing the body, calming the mind, okay? Paying attention, seeing that thinking is the way that you're being in your life, and realizing that thinking is an interpretation, is not an accurate representation of reality. Therefore, if the way things occur for you is a function of thinking, you're already in trouble, okay? Because thinking is an interpretation of reality, not reality. You can see reality, but you don't operate with what you're seeing because you're so used to interpreting it that you're connected to the thought process instead of reality. So you're living in a world given by thinking instead of living in the world that's actually the world, right? So through practicing meditation, what are we doing? We're learning to pay attention. We're learning to be aware of the thought activity, move attention away from that, over to the awareness of the body breathing. And as I have said many times, it's very important that when your awareness is aware of the body breathing, that thinking is not there. It is possible for you to experience not thinking. Not thinking is real. Not thinking does exist, right? Your thoughts are not thought. No, they're thought, space, right? Like that. So there is an awareness without thinking. And one of the things that is critical in terms of why we do these practices and why we study these teachings is because if you want to experience the truth of yourself, then you have to understand you cannot think what you are. You cannot think what you are because what you are is not a concept. It is not a thought. It can't be thought of. It is beyond thought. It has no identity per se. Has no identity. As a matter of fact, not only does it not have an identity, but as you continue on to realize your true nature, you discover that all of what you experience is you. Now that's advanced material, right? But if you stay in this process and if you keep practicing these things, that becomes self-evident. The truth will reveal itself to you when you calm down, when the mind is calm, so you have some space, right? The truth will reveal itself to you when you calm down. Just by your paying attention, you'll start to begin to see how things really are. You'll start to see in real time, this is what we were talking about, you'll start to see in real time that your personality is a process that's playing. It involves what? Thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, memories, imaginations, all that stuff is going on, right? But there is a witness to all this. There is an awareness of all this that's not that. That's not that. There's an awareness of all that that's not that. Well, that's news to most people, right? Because for most people, that was all there was. That was all there was. There was no questioning that. That's all there is. So now you're introduced to this new possibility. Your life becomes a relationship to possibility instead of probability. But then what you have to do is you have to understand that you have to wake up and stay awake. You have to come out of the dream. You have to come out of the hypnotic state. That's number one job, is to come out of the hypnotic state. How do you do that? Well, first you have to recognize who you are. Now, the recognition of who you are may only be a conceptual understanding in the beginning, right? But at some point you have to take that conceptual understanding, right, and look at it for yourself to see if you can see what that concept speaks about. So you don't have to believe me anymore. You see what I'm saying? Because a lot of the times I work with people and I end up finding myself almost arguing with them. You know what I mean? Trying to convince them about the truth, right? Well, that's only because they're still in the modality of only understanding it conceptually, okay? But you don't have to understand this conceptually. Awareness is the most obvious aspect of your experience that there is. Awareness is the most obvious aspect of your experience that there is. You may have not singled it out like that, you may have not looked at it that way, but it is nonetheless the case. Which means at any time, at any point in time, you can look at what's looking. You can look at the awareness. Now, when you look at, now this is very important because this is how you transition from believing in this to knowing this, right? From believing the truth to being convinced of the truth, right? Because you saw it yourself. You didn't depend on somebody telling you about it, right? And the way that happens is you look and you see that if I look at this awareness that I'm being told is what I am, and I'm being told that this awareness is formless, it doesn't have a gender, it has no age, right? It doesn't need anything, it doesn't want anything, it's satisfied all the time, right? I'm told all this, that sounds too good to be true, right? So let me look and see, let me look and see. If it's true, I must be able to see it for myself. If I am it, I must be able to recognize it, right? If I am it. So what you have to do is you have to be willing to look for the awareness, look to see the awareness. You know, Douglas Harding was somebody who was trying to figure a way out to experience this directly, you know, and he came up with experiments that people can do to experience this. I was listening to an interview between Richard Lang, who is the guy who kind of took over teaching Douglas Harding's teaching after Douglas Harding died. And he travels around the world doing workshops, you know, he's really become the Douglas Harding of our time, right? And I was listening to an interview of him with a Buddhist monk, a guy who became a Buddhist monk, right? And the Buddhist monk described his process of traveling to India, living in monasteries, doing these very intense meditation processes and so forth, and trying to experience reality and experience the truth through that process. And when he met Richard Lang, and Richard Lang introduced him to Harding's work, and he started to do the exercises, he had the awakening experience that he was trying to have through Buddhist practices. Had the awakening experience. He actually experienced being who he is. Experienced to be. Now you can't do that. You can't. Now one of the experiments that Harding came up with was called the pointing experiment. I talk about this in my first book, you know, Enlightenment Made Easy, right? And in the pointing experiment, he says if you just point at what's looking at your finger, if you just point at what's looking at your finger, right, you'll be pointing to you. Now, when I say just point at what's looking at your finger, what I mean by that is that a lot of people who've done that particular experiment say, I'm pointing at my nose. What are you talking about? I'm pointing at my nose. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about pointing to what's looking through your eyes. What's using your eyeballs to see? Your eyeballs don't see, you know, your eyeballs don't see. Your brain isn't conscious, your brain doesn't see. There's something using your brain and your eyes to be here. It's looking through your eyes. When you point, you're pointing at that. You're pointing at what's looking at your finger, not your nose, pointing at what's looking at your finger. Now, if when you point at what's looking at your finger, you get it. You get it. In other words, you get who you are. You saw who you are, okay? That happens for people, right? But when that happens for people, it's not that you're out here seeing who you are. No. What happens when you see who you are is the awareness recognizes itself. You see, so that clears up the non-duality aspect of it, right? It's not that there's not that there's you looking at the awareness. No. When you see the truth, what happens is the duality collapses and becomes non-dual, which means that all there is the self looking at itself. There's no duality. Self looking at itself. And then when you really get the hang of, being that awareness, and you look from that awareness out, you begin to understand, if you continue with these practices and teachings, you begin to see that not only is the awareness seeing itself, the awareness sees itself in everything. As Ramesh Balsekar said, the bottom line is the final teaching is all there is awareness. All there is awareness. Awareness is the truth that sets you free. Awareness is all there is. When you look out there, you think you see the world out there, right? But the world out there is appearing in awareness. And the way the world appears in awareness is that the data comes in, right? It gets crunched, it gets translated into your understandings of reality, right? And then you see a world that you learned is out there, okay? But through these practices, you begin to understand that this is awareness. This is all awareness. It looks real. It's an appearance that looks real. When you're dreaming at night, right, you're experiencing that the dream is real. You're experiencing that's happening. It's actually happening, right? And you have feelings and things happen in the dream, sometimes good, sometimes bad, right? But the reality of it is, if that can be the case when you're dreaming, how is it so far-fetched that that's the case when you think you're awake? In these teachings and these practices, what they say is that there's the dream state, right? The dream state, that's when you're asleep at night, right? Then there's the dream state when you're awake. So they talk about waking consciousness as a dream state, right? And the reason they say that is because it's no different than the dream state at night when you're sleeping. Where's that coming from? Your mind's generating that, right? Well, your mind's generating this too. That's the truth. Your mind's generating this too. So these things allow you to start to understand that there is a way to experience your life in which you can start to look at it from a view in which you're seeing it different than you were seeing it. And because you're seeing it different than you were seeing it more consistent with the way things actually are, right? That just the practice of being aware that way will reconfigure your life. Just the practice of being aware that way will transform your life. That's why Werner Erhard said back in the day when he did the S training, which was came from a Zen experience, right? The whole purpose of the S training was to wake people up. And what he said is that the purpose of the experience was to transform your experience of living, and the way you transform your experience of living is to transform who you are, right? To transform your experience of living such that the problems you've been coping with or struggling with or trying to change or putting up with change in the process of life itself. Now, what does that mean? It means that if you're awake and you're aware and you're seeing things as they are, the fact that the truth is now involved, right? Before it was a dream, that's it. But now the truth is involved. Now that the truth is involved, if you can maintain that awakeness, if you can get to that awake state, right? And you can maintain that awakeness and you're seeing things as they are instead of what you thought or how you felt about it, right? That truth is now going to start to have an impact on what's happening, right? So that gradually, as you see the truth, in other words, what do I mean by that? I mean that you begin to see that certain things will trigger you, and when they trigger you, you go into an upset, you start having emotions, and along with the emotions come these thoughts that are related to the emotions, right? Mind, body, right? The body starts getting excited, right? Different thoughts happen and what? You start experiencing stress, right? And this all gets interpreted as a threat to your survival, right? So you start acting out. You start becoming defensive or aggressive, or you try and run, right? What I mean is that when you're awake, you're watching that and you're seeing it for what it is. You're seeing it's not actually real. That your interpretations are interpretations. Your thoughts are thoughts. They are not reality. And once you're awake, you're seeing that. You're seeing it. So as you see it, it doesn't mean that it'll change immediately, no, but as you're seeing it, you're seeing that it is unrealistic. You're seeing that it is coming from beliefs and past experience, and you're seeing that it is dysfunctional. You're seeing that it is not working. It doesn't work to live this way, right? And because you're seeing that, just by applying that awareness as you go through your life and you see all the different ways that you are, all the different thoughts you have, all the different feelings you have, all your patterns, right? All the ways you behave, right? In relationship to other people, in relationship to yourself, in relationship to your life. Just by having an awareness and having a witness, a conscious, intelligent, wise witness of what's happening, that what's happening starts to reorganize itself to be related to what is true. That's the process of transformation, right? Now, in order for that process to take, and that process of transformation is one in which you become freer and freer and freer and freer, because what's happening is you're realizing that if what's coming up in terms of my thoughts and feelings is dysfunctional and unworkable and just causes problems and suffering, if that's the case, I'm not going to keep doing it because I see that, right? Until you're awake and you see that, you will keep doing it because you identify with it. You think, no, I am the guy you're messing with. I am the guy that you tried to screw. I am the guy that you were dishonest with, and and I am the guy that's in the situation that's trying to hurt me, right? You believe all that, and then you operate in relationship to it, and what happens? Suffering. Dysfunction and suffering. You hurt yourself, you hurt other people, you say things you don't mean, right? You do things that serve no purpose, and then you have to live with those consequences. And then because the personality has a superego, right? Personality has a conscience, now you have that to live with too. Now you have to live with how you feel about how you are, how you feel about the way you've been, right? This is the psychological nightmare that most people are living, right? So this possibility offers you the opportunity to come out of the dream, come out of the nightmare, and start paying attention in an awake way. But in order to do that, you first have to wake up, right? So the first thing is to wake up. How do you wake up? You practice paying attention and realizing that there is a possibility of wakeness, there is a possibility of awareness in which there is no thinking going on. This is what you're doing in formal meditation. You're practicing paying attention, you're practicing recognizing the truth, recognizing awareness, right? That's why I emphasize the fact that, and I don't understand why meditation teachers don't emphasize this more, because if not, nobody's meditating. That's not meditation. If you move your attention from the thinking activity over to the awareness of the body breathing, and then you have the thought, oh, I'm aware of the body breathing, you didn't move your attention. It's still thinking, right? And this is insidious, right? People don't even realize that's the case. They just have the thought, I'm meditating, and they believe it. That's it. That's not meditation. Meditation is when you realize that there is this space without thought. And this space without thought is awareness. This space without thought is awareness. So even though when you're practicing mindfulness, even though you may only touch that momentarily, right? And then you're yanked right back into the mental state, right? Just the fact that you touched it at all changes everything because you've made contact with the truth. So if you keep practicing this because you understand, the more contact you have with the truth, the more that possibility can express itself in your life. It's that simple. And those of you who have practiced with sincerity and practiced meditation the way it's meant to be done will start to get the effect of it. The effect of it is that in your ordinary life, as you go through life, right, you start being there. You start being there. You start realizing, wow, something happened, and then I went into this emotional state, and I started having these negative thoughts, and my body got jacked up for fight or flight, right? But you're seeing it now instead of being it, right? And because you're seeing it, you realize that this isn't working. I recognize this. This is familiar. This is a pattern. I've done this a lot of times, and it never worked. Why would I continue to do this? You can't ask that question unless you're awake. Otherwise, you're so identified with what's happening, you're spending all your energy justifying yourself, aren't you? Oh yeah, I did this because that person did this to me, and I can't allow that, you know. You're justifying yourself, you're defending yourself, you're explaining yourself, even though what you're doing doesn't work, right? But you don't want to look bad. You know, you don't want to be the one that's wrong, right? And so you maintain the posture and you maintain the pattern even though it doesn't work. And you know it doesn't work on some level, right? But you're living with that too. This whole thing causes stress, okay? So this practice is a way to come out of the suffering. It is a way to come out of the dream state, right? But it requires that you have an intention to be awake and to be awake consistently. Now, so how do you become awake? By practicing paying attention to not being awake. That's how you become awake, by practicing paying attention to not being awake. Because if you're paying attention to not being awake, it's the awakeness that's paying the attention. And that's what's happening when you move your attention from the thinking activity to the body, awareness of the body breathing. You're aware of the body breathing. And there's something very valuable happening when you're aware of the body breathing that you see. If you look, you see, I must not be the body. Because if I'm aware of the body, I can see the body. It's there, it's not me. It's there, it's not me. This is an important step that has to be taken, that you have to come to the recognition that the truth of what you are is not physical. Now, if I say that to you, if I say, are you aware enough of your awareness to recognize that it's not physical? That's not hard, right? You can do that. You can look and see, no, the awareness is not physical. It's not physical, right? So if you see the awareness is not physical, then the next step is relatively simple to take, which is that is that not your essence? Is that not the essence of what you actually are? Because if that's not here, you're not here. Is that not your essence? So that's not hard to get, right? Oh, that's my essence, okay. So I am the awareness, right? So by recognizing that that's the case, then you start to look to see through the process of mindfulness meditation that if I'm aware of the body breathing, I must not be physical. I must not be a physical body. I must be the awareness. But I've been so hypnotized and so conditioned to believe I am this body that I have been living as this. I have been living as this. Why is this important, right? Because in the end, this body's going to die, right? And unless you wake up and understand the truth and know who you really are, you'll be worried about that your entire life, right? In fact, you'll spend most of your life trying to avoid thinking about it, right? Because it's too terrible. The idea that you're going to die is too terrible. Nobody wants to think about it, right? But these teachings and practices are telling you, you can come out of that. You can practice the same way you practice believing that you were a physical body. You can practice understanding the truth that you are not a physical body. And if you succeed through these practices and teachings, if you succeed before the body dies, right, your death will be very easy. Be very easy to die because it won't be you. It'll be your body. That's why great masters, when it was coming time for their death, they would say, I will be leaving my body. They literally talked about it that way, I'll be leaving my body. In fact, some of the great masters actually could say, I'll be leaving my body this afternoon at 3 o'clock. And at 3 o'clock, they die. So, not they die, but that's the vernacular, but the body drops, okay? So that's what's possible. But don't worry about that. That's just, you know what I mean? That's Disney talk, right? To people who are grounded in the everyday reality that we live in. So don't worry about that. Worry about the idea that if you get this and if you practice this and if you wake up and see things as they are, before the end comes, you will be happy. You'll be satisfied. You'll be calm. You'll be relaxed. You'll be able to have some fun. You'll be able to enjoy this instead of this being a nightmare. You know, I mean, look at the condition that we find ourselves in. I mean, the common condition that we find ourselves in, and it's such a common condition, nobody questions it, right? You get up in the morning, and what are you looking forward to the end of the day? It's Monday, what are you looking forward to? Friday, right? It's Friday, what are you looking forward to, you know, next Friday? You know, you're in the middle of your career, what are you looking forward to? The end of my career, retirement, right? So isn't it interesting that the way the personality deals with the opportunity that life presents to us is something that we're trying to get through. Something that we're trying to get through without it being too disturbing, get through without it being too upsetting, right? Get it over with. We want to get this over with, right? What the hell does that have to, what does that say about the condition that we're in? A miracle, awareness is a miracle. We don't understand it. We don't know, how did this happen? How did I end up being here, right? And like Douglas Harding used to say, you know, you didn't have to happen. Most people never have that thought. I didn't have to happen? No, you didn't have to happen, but you did. And since you did, you have the opportunity to experience having a human life. Now, are you going to take advantage of that, or are you going to just go into the flow, go into the regular way that most people experience their life and start to experience as a problem? My life is a problem. You know, it's a problem because I'm dissatisfied. I don't get what I want often enough, you know. I don't like my body. This isn't the right body. If I had one of the bodies that I see on TV, I'd be happy. So, or I'm not smart enough, or I don't have enough money, or the skin color is not the right skin color, right? That's what happens. That's the world we're living in, right? And so right off the bat, before you get out of grade school, you're nuts. Yeah, you go to school and, you know, they finish the job. You started being nuts at home. Then you go to school and they finish the job. By the time you're in high school, you're totally nuts. You know, by the time you're a teenager, when you're trying to figure out how to be an adult, God help you. You know, you're just so inundated with anxiety and depression and concern because the competition's so great. And the competition, even if you're one of the people that has the beautiful body, now that's the problem. You know, a beautiful woman is only seen for her body, right? And so there's the Marilyn Monroe syndrome, right? That nobody really sees me, nobody really knows me, nobody really loves me, they only love this body, right? So you can't even win with the right body, right? Because it's neurotic. The personality is neurotic, right? What's neurosis? Neurosis means that you're inundated with a problematic way of being. You're inundated with a problematic way of being, right? So when people come to me for psychotherapy, my job is to introduce them to the real problem. When they come in, the real problem is what other people are doing. The real problem is the circumstances of their life, right? But if the therapy is going to work, I have to introduce them to the real problem. The real problem is you. Who you're being is the problem. How you're being is the problem. How you think is the problem. The way you let your feelings run the show is the problem. The way you trust your